would be asking David. David, my question to you would be, it's already in public notice without flattering you that you and alongside an American in the person of Aaron Greenspan actually co-owned the lawsuit, and of course you funded it quite a while, especially during the period of June 2023 under the Freedom Information Act (FOI) against several US agencies. At that point in time, many Nigerians wished you well, especially considering the fact that he who occupies such lofty office, I'm talking about the office of the president, should reflect the values that such office exudes. And of course, some section of Nigerians actually antagonized you, and of course felt that such, attempt was just amounting to futility. But good to say the news is back again. How were you greeted by such news? And of course, what is your reaction as to the fact that your name, as you claimed, was carefully omitted without giving you due credit?
Okay, so first of all, the most important thing is that the verdict which has come from the judge, I think is in line with best practices and common sense. Because my fear in all of this was that a terrible legal precedent was going to be set, but thankfully the judge delivered what I thought was a commonsensical judgment. So that's the most important thing. Now, obviously, as you mentioned, some section of the Nigerian media decided that somehow the most important thing for them was to deny me credit or to try and write me out of my own story, which, good luck to them. But that's not really why we're here, and this isn't really about me. Right? There's a much bigger issue at play here, and I'm just the vessel, I'm just the conduit by which this thing came to be. I feel like it's my duty as a Nigerian that had the circumstances to permit me to pursue this thing. It was my duty to do it. I feel like if you have the circumstances, you have the education, and you have the funding to make it possible to do something for your country, and you don't do it, then you're part of the problem. So I don't feel like I've done anything special. I feel like it's what I ought to do. It's my job. The more important thing here is that, as I said, a terrible legal precedent was not set, because the initial argument that was being made, and the initial argument that was initially sustained by the same judge, and the argument that was being made by the DEA and the FBI in court, was that even though this person is the number one public official who has seen the lives of 200 million people, that those 200 million African people somehow do not have the right to scrutinize this person's life, right? Which, if that was a legal argument that had been allowed to fly, if that had been sustained by the court, that would have had so many implications and ramifications. Because there's a specific segment from the DEA's argument in December 2024, which said, and I'm quoting almost verbatim, I'm quoting this from memory. It said, while the plaintiff argues that the rights of 200 million Nigerians to know what their government is up to supersedes the privacy rights of an individual, what the plaintiff fails to take into account is that the rights of Nigerians to know what their government is up to does not extend to the right to know what Tinubu was up to. So in other words, what a US government agency was arguing in court was that 200 million Nigerians don't have a right to know what their president was up to before he became president. Now, yes, you might have the right to know what your government is up to, but the people in your government, you don't have a right to know what they're up to, which is a completely nonsensical argument to make. And if that had been allowed to fly, then the implications for future disclosures, the implications for public accountability would have just been terrible. So I'm very happy that didn't happen. I'm very happy the judge adopted a commonsensical position in all of this, and I think the analysts have to move on from this trash fire.
All right, we appreciate your submission, especially considering the fact that you are not making this about you, in as much as you actually filed that lawsuit. In fact, you saw yourself as a vehicle or a conduit, as you mentioned. But then let's look at the law book, what it actually says, especially looking at it from the Freedom of Information Act. I have a lawyer right here who will be giving us perspective to this. Now, my question to you, Mr. Jide, would be, do we have a right, especially considering the fact that someone is occupying a very lofty position, the office of the president? Do the people under the Freedom of Information Act have the right to know the history and the real identity of who the person who occupies that lofty position is?
Absolutely. It's necessary, and it's part of the democratic tenets as we practice democracy. But you see, having said that, in this particular case, you also have what you call the Privacy Act that protects data. In fact, talking about the case in the United States of America, even if this information is released, how do we position it in the Nigerian law? if you look at Section 131 of the Nigerian Constitution 1999 as amended, that stipulates the criteria for a candidate emerging to contest for the office of the president. The age is age 40. You are expected to be a member of a political party. Then you are expected to have studied to the level of school certificates, except for now that there's a bill in the House to upgrade the academic requirements. And again, in the same section, let me go to section 36 of the Nigerian Constitution 1999 as amended. In a criminal allegation situation, the accused, and now we call them defendants in the criminal justice administration, is presumed innocent until the case is proved beyond all reasonable doubt. You see, so these are the issues. Now, it was disclosed that Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu forfeited about $460,000 to the American government. That could have been in a civil matter. Has he been convicted in the US? We don't know. You see, and that is the delicate position that politicians occupy. In the case of Atiku, the issue of intel came up. In the case of Obi was alleged to have been held down in the UK to answer to some offenses. Even back to Nigeria here, I still question the system. In the case of Magu, the former acting chairman of EFCC, he was brought out of office on allegations of corruption. Was he ever prosecuted on those allegations? The answer remains no. So these are issues. And again, talking about our system here, the personality we are discussing is the president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Are we now saying that American government will now pick him to go and prosecute him? You see, he enjoys immunity now. When the bill showed up in the National Assembly recently to deal with immunity, did not even extend to the presidential level. You know, it got thrown out. So until he leaves office now, of what benefit will it be to us? Almost all the leaders are suspicious in their personality and character. I remember at a point in time when a former chairman of INEC came out to say most of the people in the National Assembly are criminals. How he could justify that, I don't know. So these are issues. So on the scale of perception, is he of questionable character? Some may perceive him as questionable, you see, but I'm speaking now to law. Recently, the American government came up with an investigative report that US said was being engaged to sponsor Boko Haram in Nigeria. Has it been established? You know, so these are issues of law.
Okay. Based on the immunity clause that you talked about, that he has immunity now, and I wanted to make it clear to Nigerians that are watching. Let's assume that okay, he has immunity, and again, a person is presumed innocent until proven guilty. But you also brought the issue of immunity, which means the possibility of him being arraigned or pursued is not there, even in the US. It's not there.
I cannot say about US, but if you understand the dynamics
even
of
in the US, it's not there.
The American government cannot come and pick the Nigerian president.
Okay, but can they invite him?
He can be invited, but has he been invited? And please, on the scale of law is not something predictable.
Exactly.
Even many are still worried that Donald Trump became the president of America, giving series of cases against him and things like that. So who understands law fully?
Except lawyers.
Exactly. So if the American government is concerned, I'm so happy with what those who are driving that the Freedom of Information Act be fully implemented, disclose investigative information about Bola Ahmed Tinubu.